All right, folks, if I'm sounding extra knowledgeable, extra insightful, maybe for the last week or two, man, I got to admit, I've been reading up with the NFL Draft Bible, and I got more to go, but I've got hours to get it in because tonight's the night, and it's almost a national holiday for you draft nicks and draft fanatics out there. We got the guy on the line, Rick Saratella for NFL Draft Bible. If you have yet to catch our previous live streams or the videos that we've posted, he's broken down every position. And of course, you got to get on over to NFL Draft Bible. Rick, how you doing today?
Hey, happy draft day, Mark. It's funny, I don't get too many texts on Christmas or Thanksgiving, or even New Year's, but draft morning, I wake up to a slew of text messages. Happy draft day. So here we are.
I got to tell you, Rick, that you are the second person in my life, and certainly the first one is not an expert. He's not a professional. He's just obsessed with it. That says "Happy Draft Day" to me every year because I got a buddy that I've known for about 25 years, and actually the first time we really got together was for an NFL draft party. This guy is so obsessed that he's a pilot, and he has flown me to his house at least 3 times to watch the draft. Like, I got it, Mark. I'm making sure you're getting flown in for free to watch the NFL draft, to take it in all weekend. And he does the whole deal, builds his own draft manual. But again, he's just doing it on the side. You fortunately, you've got an excuse for your obsession.
Well, it sounds like he's got the sickness, but I need some of that VIP personal jet service in my life. So it's good to have friends in high places.
Awesome stuff from Rick Saratella. Again, he's helped us out so much in the last couple of weeks. We got breakdowns on all the positions, but for the deep dive, go to NFLDraftBible.com. Before we talk 2020, Rick, the networks have been showing the old drafts. I picked up a 1989 about a few days ago. Then last night it was 2014. It was interesting to hear John Gruden just gush about Johnny Manziel. Should have been the number one pick. Man, I want this guy on my team. And John Gruden, I got all the respect for the guy. Love the guy. Think he's entertaining. Also think he's just a wealth of knowledge. But obviously, whether he missed on the talent, he missed on the pick eventually. Ray Lewis was on set in 2014, and it was fascinating to hear his insight and how dead on he was. Mike Evans to the Buccaneers. He loved Khalil Mack, loved him. Some other guys that he either compromised on and thought a little less of that haven't panned out, and then some other ones that he said, yeah, this guy can play. Sammy Watkins, he loved as well. So interesting to go back 6 years and see where the experts, even you, I've guessed, have maybe missed on one or two through the years. Maybe.
Hey, if you can bat 300, I think you're just like baseball. You're batting a pretty good average, and most of the picks, I think historically, any team, any draft, you go back and look, usually about 50% of those guys are not on the roster, several years down the road. But to your point, it's a great exercise, and it just goes to show, like, here's Gruden, a guy that is known as a QB whisperer, right? He had his own show on ESPN with the quarterbacks in the war room, and it's like, here's a guy who's the quote unquote QB expert, and even he is getting it wrong, on a guy like Johnny Manziel. And I think everybody was captivated by him coming out of college, and you just don't know how a guy like that translates. Like, Kyler Murray could have been the same way, because I mean, I would say that their skill sets were similar. And maybe, Murray had a better coach there and a better mind for the next level. Johnny Manziel, I think, was kind of from that oil money, never really had to work hard to get what he wanted. A golden boy throughout his whole career, even in high school, everything handed on a silver platter. So when it was time to go to work at the next level, he didn't want to learn the playbook. And even up in Canada, however many years later, 5 years later, and you talk to the teams, and it's just like, we can't get him here on time. He doesn't want to learn the playbook. He doesn't know the plays. He just wants to show up and play ball. And how much of that is the head coach going to tell you about a guy? And it's funny, you talk. I saw Jim Nagy, the Senior Bowl director, tweet out the other day, head coaches are the worst source for information on a guy because they cover up a lot of the warts. But not all head coaches are like that. Like a guy like Nick Saban will shoot you straight. He'll tell you exactly what he thinks of a guy. And he'll tell his players too, if you're not a first round pick, you should come back to Alabama, and he'll be forward about that. So some coaches are transparent, other coaches are going to go to bat for their guys. And I think that's why it's so important when you do go visit the schools. It's important to talk to the strength and conditioning coach, the position coach, people around the building, just so you can get a better feel for these guys. Because again, this year's draft is a perfect example. We don't have all these pro days and meeting with the players and getting to know them in private workouts and private visits. You're talking to a guy on Zoom for 15 minutes and then judging his personality based on that screen time.
Yeah, it's very similar to the recruiting process in college football from high school football, except there's a whole lot more tape that's valid and information, but you're taking that huge leap in regards to maturity and will he take this seriously? And for as much as you got to take it seriously going from high school to college, there's a similar just gigantic leap to the NFL in terms of okay, you're playing with grown men, you're playing with guys that have families that are trying to keep their livelihood, that take this super seriously, and you need to do as well just to keep up. And yeah, that grit, just and determination and grind factor can't be, it can be just like interviewing somebody for a job. You can try to get a feel, try to get a read, and eliminate the ones that are obvious. Okay, man, based on what they said or what they did here, we can see obviously this person, but some people are able to mask that and cover it up and get through the process. And that's why you got your booms and your busts. There's whether it's Jamarcus Russell or Johnny Manziel, and I'm just going through the quarterback busts, and I thought of 3 or 4 just a minute ago as you were talking. Yeah, there always seems to be kind of an off-field, either um, some type of substance issue or work ethic issue, typically that ties into it. And it's not, oh, well, he lost velocity on his fastball or he wasn't as quick. No, they've got that pretty much narrowed down, or he just doesn't have that next level acumen to lead the team, read the defenses, do those things as well. It's
And,
fascinating.
and to that point, these first round busts, it's not like they didn't have talent. It's not like Ryan Leaf wasn't a talented guy. He just didn't have a maturity level to be a professional. Uh, Trent Dilfer, Heath Schuler, I mean, those guys were like neck and neck coming out, and one went and won a Super Bowl. The other, lost his job to a 7th round pick and Gus Farrat. And it's just you don't know until the bullets are flying and you get them inside the building, what their makeup and DNA is. And it's just, I think, quarterback, we talk about wide receiver being the biggest bust factor. I think after that it's quarterbacks, but I think quarterbacks is just so much more fascinating because you get these guys who are so dominant at the college level. Like imagine if Andre Ware was coming out in today's NFL draft. The offensive schemes at the NFL level would suit his skill set perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of being just an NFL afterthought, we could be honoring him as a decorated career. He just came out in the wrong era.
NFL draft preview with the actual festivities, obviously just hours away. Rick Saratella, NFL Draft Bible. It's been a godsend. I have sounded very, very smart. Although I've given you all the props, Rick. So
I appreciate that,
I
Mark.
just sit here. I don't try to mask it. I'm just like, I
Hey,
go to the draft. I'll let you know what we think about whomever.
coming from the voice of college football, I'll take it, brother. So, all the listeners or audience out there, if you're not subscribed to Mark Rogers TV, make sure you do that, because if Mark doesn't tell you, then I will. You need to subscribe.
Appreciate that. Jerry Jeudy is certainly somebody that's getting few doubts from any NFL scouts, analysts in terms of his ability and seriousness about playing at the next level, because few become that polished without putting in the work. But there might be some other issues underlying.
Yeah, the big news yesterday, or maybe not so big for some teams, is Jerry Jeudy. There's a medical report from the combine on his knee that's Surprisingly now leaking here less than 24 hours before the draft. It's funny how that works, but probably a team that is not too concerned about the knee leaking that information, hoping that he slides down. And what you're hearing is that some teams are concerned about it, other teams not so much. Now, for the whole part of the year, even coming into the season, Judy's been pretty much the consensus top guy. Yeah, he's had some competition from CD Lamb and even Henry Ruggs, but I think now with the whole medical issue and the medical report and Philadelphia trying to trade up for a wide receiver, the team, the Jets are at 11. I think the team behind them are the 49ers or Falcons. They might need a receiver, but it's funny. With the whole wide receiver props going on, that's become more popular out in Vegas, and everybody looking to have fun. We had a debate on our show yesterday about Justin Jefferson because Carolina at 7, supposedly DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel could be on the trade block, 2 wide receivers. Joe Brady, obviously coming from LSU. How shocking might it be if Justin Jefferson is the first wide receiver off the board? And last time I checked, uh, Justin Jefferson to be the first wide receiver selected, $100 will win you back $5,000. So anybody out there looking to make a little exotic dark horse wager out there in Las Vegas, it's amazing some of the things, the prop bets that are floating around. But Justin Jefferson now, it wouldn't be too far fetched if that scenario occurs.
We got Rick Saratel on the line, NFLDraftBible.com. Get on over there. You've got hours to cram. You can still do it and look smart tonight at your NFL draft party and throughout the weekend, certainly, because the real draft people, this thing doesn't really get thick and into the weeds until deep into the weekend. That's when it gets interesting. These first 10 picks or 15 picks come off the board, and they're like, yeah, it's interesting. And certainly these are supposed to be the guys that are going to be impact players. But as I mentioned to you, the buddy that I've got, he really starts to get interested 3rd, 4th round, because that's when he can, tell me things like Lawrence Moten's got a hearing problem and he is going to have a tough time playing left tackle and hearing the quarterback, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But we got Rick Saratel on the line talking NFL draft. So we got Burrow and Young almost assuredly locked in 1 and 2. And then it starts to get interesting with the Lions looking at Jeffrey Okudah and others.
Yeah, and this is where the draft begins, right? I mean, quite honestly, should it take more than 2 minutes to announce the first 2 picks? Do we really need to drag out the drama? Like, let's just put the Lions on the clock. Let's get this thing started. And I believe they'll be fielding all kinds of offers. And I think the New York Giants at 4 kind of sensed that because, leave it to the New York beat writers. And I love them to death. I know all of them, but they're a sucker for a good story, and anytime they can create some clickbait, they will take the bait, line, hook, and sinker. And the Giants, did one of these virtual draft meetings with Justin Herbert the other day, and kind of say, hey, are the Giants investigating a quarterback now at number 4? And I think they got kind of wind of Detroit fielding offers, and Miami now with the draft ammunition trying to jump the Giants there at number 3. I think Detroit will explore every trade opportunity. And quite frankly, Washington will get some offers as well. It's just, at what price are they willing to give up a Chase Young? I just don't see that happening. But, there's some talk that Miami could leapfrog the Giants for the best tackle in the draft. I'm not so sure I'm buying that talk. I still think that Tua is such a unique talent that if the Dolphins don't pull the trigger here and suddenly the Chargers bypass onto it, where does he slide? And at what point does a team like the Patriots, who are at 23, suddenly become within striking distance? And, the one thing we can't allow the NFL do is to allow Tua to slide to the point where he's suddenly in striking distance of New England and they move up, because I think Bill Belichick would probably be perfectly comfortable going with a Jarrett Stidham, and if he had to roll the dice with Brian Hoyer. But man, wouldn't Tua just be such an upgrade? And if Miami is not trading up at 3 to draft a quarterback, how far does he tumble? How far does he slide? How much of this live stream draft coverage is it going to be where they have the camera set up in the house? Will they be like, instead of going to the green room, will they be going to the house camera to see, like, hey, where's Tua? What's his reaction? He's down to 20 now. Like, what's going on? So I think if there's going to be any drama, it's what happens there at 3. And if it's not a QB, if it's not Tua, how far does he slide? And that's the one thing that I think it could be captivating that I'll be monitoring tonight.
Got folks jumping on the line here in the live chat. You know the deal here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. You bring your comments, your questions, debate topics, and we'll throw them at Rick. And I'll have something to say, I'm sure, as well. But he will have the wealth of knowledge. And again, NFLDraftBible.com. I'm searching through our previous videos for any kind of comments or questions that we have there, and we'll dig into those as well if needed. If we're looking, Rick, at the rumor mill over the last week or few days in regards to late risers or who's plummeting, in addition to possibly Justin Jefferson because of the circumstances in Carolina, who would those guys be?
I think a lot of it could depend on what happens. You hear some of these players being dangled in trades now, like a Yannick Ngakoue from Jacksonville is pretty much all the shit. I mean, what a nasty, ugly Twitter feud he had with the Jaguars owner on Twitter out in the open public. I mean, really nasty. I don't see him playing for Jacksonville anymore. The question becomes, hey, is there a team willing to give up a first-round pick for him? Same thing for Trent Williams in Washington. He is on the trade block. And, how much does that impact the offensive tackle trickle down effect? Because I think that's where you're going to see some more surprises. And we talked about the depth, wide receivers, offensive tackles. I believe I've got between 15 to 17 at each position in the top 100. So 1/3 of my top 100 is either an offensive tackle or a wide receiver. And I think, Mekhi Becton from Louisville is a guy who could tumble because now his combine test, I guess he failed the drug test at Indy. But it's my understanding that there was more flunked drug tests this year than any year ever. And so how much does that impact his test? Was he just the one that got singled out? Was his the one that was leaked? Because I've heard that, there were so many players that flunked the drug test at the combine. It's just like teams are just throwing their hands up like, whatever, so Becton could slide, you're hearing, Louisville. And, that number 4 is intriguing because I'm hearing it's Tristan Wirfs, but it could be Andrew Thomas. And if it is Andrew Thomas, then Wirfs is the next guy off the board. And then Jedrick Wills from Alabama. And then Becton could do the slide. Then you're hearing that Isaiah Wilson, the other Georgia tackle, could be a mid-first round pick. Ezra Cleveland from Boise State is the guy that skyrocketed here leading up to the draft. And now he could very well go ahead of guys like Josh Jones from Houston and Austin Jackson from USC. But there's a legitimate 7 to 8 offensive tackles that could be selected in the first round. It's not going to happen. So I think that's where you're going to see some of these talented players slide all the way into round 2. And then you got a guy like a Matthew Pert from UConn who had a pretty stellar Senior Bowl that is going to maybe go round 3 and possibly start at the next level. And then Lucas Niang from TCU. When I spoke to Chase Young at the Maxwell Club Awards, he said Lucas Niang was the toughest guy he's faced throughout his career at Ohio State. And he's got a medical thing too. So because of the medical, he may go round 3, round 4, wind up, outplaying some of these guys who go in round 1.
We've got position breakdowns with Rick Ciratella from NFL Draft Bible. They're all posted right here, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Again, you can go straight through every position, get his thoughts about the first players off the board, the guys that he really likes that not necessarily are going to be drafted high, sleepers, off the radar guys as well. We've taken it from the other side. We probably posted a deep dive on 20 to 25 of the most prominent programs in the country and gotten the blogger and beat writer perspective from that side, whether that's Alabama, LSU, Auburn, Kentucky, Ohio State, Michigan. I'll go on down the line. You can imagine USC, Clemson, and others in regards to their players and thought process there. Minnesota, the Golden Gophers playing much better football these days, obviously, under PJ Fleck, and they'll be a factor in the NFL draft in the next few years. We got Rick's take on Antoine Winfield and others, as well as Daniel House from Gopher Hole and Score North, projecting those guys coming up. Rick, we've talked about the evolution of the game on offense and defense, and more so on offense, and then the defensive response in recent years to the offensive change in football and what's been taken from college football, how the quarterback play and what's demanded of the quarterback has changed with these mobile guys like a Kyler Murray or what could have been a Johnny Manziel and others. Uh, as you see the draft play out and this evolution take place on both sides of the ball, not just that, anything you can think of, what positions have been valued more or devalued? Anything in the last 5 to 10 years because of the style of play on either side of the ball? And I know linebacker comes to play because these guys can't just be run stuffers. They got to be able to work all over the field.
I think your last comment hit the nail on the head. I think linebacker, in terms of evolution and evolving in terms of what teams are looking for at the next level, the linebacker, the days of the downhill thumper, the Shaq Quarterman type of prospect in years past. I mean, you might be talking about Shaq 10 years ago as a first round guy. But, you just can't earn a living like that now, being a two down, thumper. And the way that the linebackers are asked to cover and play in space and be able to tackle, you've got to be able to do it all. And, I take a look at a guy like Isaiah Simmons. I mean, that is a dream scenario for NFL defensive coordinators, a guy who can impact all three levels of the defense. And he could drop back deep. He could move over to the slot. He can get after the quarterback. I mean, that to me is prototypical of what a defensive coordinator wants in terms of a blue chip talent, a guy that's versatile, a guy that's fast, and he could do multiple things on the field. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, a year ago, coming out of Florida, was selected by the Saints relatively high, and they played him at 5 different positions this past season. A lot of people said, "Oh, why are they taking Chauncey Gardner-Johnson so high?" Well, his versatility allowed him to just be moved around. And I think that's what you want to have. And also, I think that the same could be said for a lot of the secondary cornerbacks now, safeties. A lot of these guys are interchangeable. You're seeing, the nickel corner also sliding into that safety position now at the next level. And a guy like Levonta Taylor, who, came out of high school as a 5-star corner, he's being viewed as a safety prospect. So, and I think, they moved him all around there at Florida State. He had a bunch of different coaches come in. They didn't know what to do with him. But, he's kind of a forgotten man in this year's draft. He'll probably go day 3, but that versatility is valued. And I think, the reason why Grant Delpit is sliding, there's concerns now about his tackling ability. And I think it's crazy to me that, he could be the third or fourth safety off the board from what you're hearing. How the mighty have fallen. And again, I think, we talked about it during our positional previews, the LSU, so many talented defensive players on that LSU defense. I think some of them are almost forgotten as we get up to the draft, like a Jacob Phillips, the linebacker. I mean, this is a very talented guy that nobody's talking about. Even Christian Fulton, who I believe is a solid first-round pick. You're not hearing any noise. You're hearing about Okudah. You're hearing about CJ Henderson, who, by the way, talk about a riser. You're hearing maybe top 10, maybe off the board before Okudah. And the trickle-down effect to that is A.J. Terrell from Clemson moving up. But after those 3 guys, I believe Fulton's the next best corner off the board. You're hearing almost nothing from Christian Fulton. So, going back to your original question, though, I think linebackers have evolved more than any other position. I still believe that the running back position is still the most devalued, and perfect example is Leonard Fournette is on the trade block. Do you think anybody is going to give up a draft pick for Leonard Fournette, or are they going to go take a Jonathan Taylor for a fraction of the cost, right? So it's an interesting scenario, I think, too, with the quarterbacks. Uh, if Tua tumbles, if Jordan Love is there at the end of round one, if Jake Fromm and Jacob Eason and Jalen Hurts are there in round two, teams now have to decide: do I want to go with a young guy, or do I want to kind of reboot with Cam Newton or Jameis Winston or Joe Flacco? So there's some veteran guys out there that have won Super Bowls, gotten to Super Bowls. And it's going to be an interesting decision-making process, because also you have to remember that a rookie quarterback is probably going to be 2 years away, unless he's Joe Burrow. Probably any other quarterback, maybe Justin Herbert could play right away. But I think when you take out the offseason program, you take away the rookie minicamp, the OTAs, and all these practice reps, the mental reps online, virtuoso style, going through mental reps is only going to go so far. When you're a new quarterback, man, you need those practice reps and the timing, especially working with your wide receivers. So a veteran guy like a Newton or Winston or Flacco can miss an off season, still probably pick up a new offense a little bit faster than a younger guy coming in. And now you have to weigh the risk reward of, do I go with an unknown commodity, or do I go with the veteran guy? And I think a lot of it comes down to, like, the Chargers, who got just snake bitten by injuries last year. But this team was a team built to contend, and a team ready to win. And I think they could, if they shored up that quarterback position, and Rivers was subpar for his standards. But if they can improve that quarterback position, if Cam Newton were to come in there and be the Cam Newton of old, the Chargers can win right now. And that's where teams have to have that gut check in the war room and decision-making process, and figure out, hey, are we looking to reload or rebuild? And how is the offseason now impacting this upcoming season?
In a nutshell, you ran down the resumes of Flacco, Newton, and Winston, from Super Bowl winner, Super Bowl participant, to, I don't know, the first 30-30 guy in the history of baseball. We think 30-30 steals and home runs in baseball, but 30-30 guy in Jameis Winston. Which of those three would you go for San Diego? Or, of course, I was going to do that even years later. The Chargers being ready-made to win. Who would be your guy?
Yeah, Los Angeles. I've been doing that slip all week myself, but I think Cam Newton, to me, if of course I got to do my due diligence and see what the shoulder's feeling like and looking like, and if I felt comfortable that he was back to full strength. I mean, Cam Newton's proven he could carry a team on his back, take them right up to the Super Bowl. And to me, I think, he just would give the Chargers the best opportunity to win now. Where Flacco, my understanding is he has confided in people that he's willing to accept the backup role at this stage of his career. And I think that's kind of where Joe Flacco is right now. He's probably a top caliber backup. Jameis Winston, I think, is, you hear about the LASIK eye surgery and trying to improve his eyesight and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, turnovers are a killer. And when you throw 30 picks, and I don't know how many fumbles he lost this past year, but when you're close to 40 turnovers in 16 games, you just can't win at the next level doing that.
I've got a Florida State live show on every week, and those guys will defend Jameis Winston to the hilt, and I'll let most of it go, Rick, but it got to the point of comparing him and elevating him past Tom Brady as that being a downgraded quarterback. And I was like, okay, whoa, we got to stop right here. I understand Brady's age. I understand Belichick's great. I understand that Winston's turnovers may not have all been his fault, just like any other quarterback. Just because a quarterback throws 8 or 10 picks, that doesn't mean all of those were his fault. That goes with the territory. And I understand maybe he had a few more, not his fault, because of offensive line and tipped passes. But come on, 30 picks.
And I'll tell you, he's a great self promoter. He said when the Bucks signed Brady, he said, "Hey, hats off to me. I was replaced by the greatest quarterback of all time." But real quick, something you might find interesting, since you brought up Florida State and a guy out there from Florida State that at one point was viewed of pretty highly amongst evaluators, was DeAndre Francois.
Mm.
And obviously he's had his share of issues, but in terms of being gutsy and toughness, and boy, the beating he took behind that Florida State offensive line as a freshman, he really showed some heart out there. And he played this past year at Hampton, and again he had a bunch of interceptions, but he's in this year's draft class, and it's going to be interesting to see a guy like that who was once heralded, who was once at a Power Five program. Just to have a guy like that in camp, you just never know, because again, the talent is there. Can a coach get it out of him?
Speaking of the Tampa situation, Gronk comes in there. I think most of us raised our eyebrows when he announced his retirement. I didn't know for sure that he was going to come back, but it's certainly no shock to anyone. Tom Brady's down there. Does Tampa draft differently because they've got Brady and they need players around him, both to protect him first and foremost, and obviously to have weapons for him?
I think it's all about making Mr. Brady happy at this point, and uh, I believe that they will take a tackle or another wide receiver and really, go for the kill on offense. I think Bruce Arians is a guy that just wants to wing it and fling it. Suddenly, you look at Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and uh, you know, what will they do with those tight ends? Will they keep OJ Howard? Will they keep Cameron Brate, and Rob Gronkowski? Boy, oh boy. Um, I mean, now if you add another piece, if you want to keep Godwin outside, or you want to slide him in the slot, or you want to add a guy like Henry Ruggs now to stretch the defense, and then you have Ruggs stretching the field with Evans and Godwin outside and Gronk underneath, and boy, oh boy, oh boy, this offense is going to be something else. And if not, there's plenty of offensive tackles for them to upgrade that offensive line. Now, I go back to, when Peyton Manning came in with the Broncos program, I think it took him 2 years to actually get to that, win that Super Bowl. And I do think there's going to be a transition because the culture is going to change. I watched the Gronk press conference, and they asked him, what are the players on the Tampa Bay roster expected to see? And he said, you're going to see that everybody's going to be accounted for. Everything is going to be a business-like approach, and everything is going to be highly competitive. And I think it's probably going to be a year of shock, for those players to get over, because it is going to be a different kind of an intensity and an atmosphere. And also, again, not having these off season, Brady's been pretty persistent about, hey, we're going to get all of our virtual reps in, and we're going to, get together and learn the offense online. But, back to my previous point, there's nothing like the actual physical reps, getting the timing down, being able to hit Julian Edelman on that curl route without even looking, just knowing the timing of when he's going to turn. I do think the Buccaneers will have a year of transition, which will put Brady at 44, 45. How deep can a quarterback take a team into the playoffs at 44, 45 years old? I mean, Steve DeBerg, Vince Evans, I mean, those are like the only guys that have kind of even approached this territory. So I think, there is an age at some point in time, the age does have to catch up to Tom Brady, doesn't it?
And of course, the all-time in that from an age perspective, but he didn't have the offense on his shoulders. George Blanda, but of course, he was doing
There
a
you
lot
go.
of kicking at that point, but he would come in relief, fling a few downfield here and there. But my good, because he played for 26 years, made it to 49, but that was a day gone by. And again, he didn't have the full lift of the team all the time. Yeah. And to your point, when I asked the question about that altering their draft weekend selections, that's why Tom Brady's there. He didn't completely agree with where the Patriots were headed and the support they were giving him anyway. So
Could
that's going to
Antonio
be
Brown be next?
exactly. Well, that's those situations now in New England and Tampa Bay are exactly what football fans have been clamoring for years and years and years. We want to see these two separated and see who excels. Now it's kind of going to be from a player perspective. Obviously, Brady's in a different situation. Belichick could as long as they could wheel him out there, could be masterminding offenses and defenses as long as his brain's still intact. But for Tom Brady, obviously, uh, Father Time's going to catch up with him at some point. I have my doubts at times, but it's going to happen at some point.
And as long as they're in separate conferences, there is that possibility: Tampa Bay, New England Super Bowl, and that would be a ratings bonanza. And by the way, I've actually heard, you might find this interesting. I've actually heard rumblings that this year's NFL draft ratings, the viewer audience, could approach Super Bowl level type of viewership. So I do believe this will be the most viewed NFL draft that we've ever had. And I think last year, on average, 6 million viewers were tuned in per minute during the duration of the NFL draft. I could see that number double this year.
Fascinating. Yeah. I didn't know exactly how to take that. I thought that because of the pandemic and the situation we're all facing, on one hand, I thought and heard some critical comments out there from people actually entrenched in the NFL and entrenched in the coverage of the NFL, kind of questioning, okay, do we do this in face of people suffering out there? And then on the other hand, a lot of people in the camp of, hey, let's celebrate our freedom. Let's celebrate what we do. Let's not be held back. Let's enjoy life. We can do as much as we possibly can. They can pull it off in reasonably safe conditions. So let's celebrate. And a lot of people may just rally around, hey, we've got some semblance of sports because, as you know, there's a lot of NFL fans that just say, I'm out fishing or doing whatever that weekend. Just let me know what the final result is, versus now might be like, well, I got to be inside anyway, so let's take it in.
Well, being here in New Jersey, I know you're close by as well, and I'm sure we all remember 9/11 and how much it meant for us to have baseball back,
Yep.
and what a great distraction. And somebody this morning I saw had a great comment, and I'll echo it here. Anywhere I can get a slice of normalcy right now, I'll take it, because man, uh, who hasn't? I mean, I don't know. Here in New Jersey, everybody's been impacted by this, whether it's your immediate family, a friend, a relative. We've all been impacted by this in some way, shape, or form. And, I listen to these quote unquote experts talk about we may not have peaked yet. So, what's the point of canceling the draft? How far do you want to cancel it? Because you know what? A lot of people, unfortunately, the reality is, are going to continue to die on a daily basis and probably for the next several months. So do we push this back months down the road? Because at the end of the day, you're just doing a disservice to the players. All these players will just remain in limbo. They'll have no idea where they're playing. They'll have no way to prepare for the upcoming season, learn a playbook, understand what they're going to be entering. They'll just remain up in the air. And, quite honestly, I think that, it is a slice of normalcy for even a couple hours a day. Hey, let us enjoy the moment. I mean, Donald Trump's press conferences are the most watched thing on television right now. And, if there's all these people tuning in for that, it seems to be pretty repetitive every day. I don't know why I torture myself and watch these things, but I think that the NFL draft could be the entertainment factor that we haven't gotten. And Mark, come on, man. I love ESPN Classic, but aren't you getting tired of these reruns from 15, 20 years ago? I think we need some new action to talk about and discuss, right?
Well, I'm one of the last guys that gets tired of them, but yeah, I am tired of them. So if I get tired of them, then you've reached the last guy on earth that could possibly get tired of watching, Penn State and Michigan from 2004. We got Rick Saratella on the line from NFL Draft Bible talking about, hey, as he greeted us off the top, happy draft day, draft weekend. This is a holiday for many of you, and I'll include myself. I don't dive into it to the extent of others, but a lot of people talk to me about recruiting, obviously, considering what I do. That's something that I just really have no interest in, but I've got to have interest in. But this is a labor of love for Rick to the nth degree, but for myself as well, because man, I love college football. I love the NFL. A lot of people don't know I love the NFL, but love it just as much. So when you talk about the marrying of the two and the transition, it's always fascinated me. As you can see, Rick, we've got late risers here to the Voice of College Football. Our crew, they stay up late, they rise late as well, kind of like their leader here. So we're getting some comments here in the live chat now. Appreciate NCIS Fanatic 21, best live stream in college football. And now we got a question coming in from Raptor 20. I guess I'm interpreting this as, who's going to be highly regarded tonight, first rounder that you have your doubts on. Not that you're predicting failure for sure, because obviously there's going to be a reason he's drafted as high as he is, but there are some serious questions.
Well, I think that right now you'd have to take a look at Kenneth Murray might be a guy, I think, from Oklahoma, where you have a lot of conflicting opinions. Some people think he is a franchise middle linebacker. Other guys are concerned about his taking some plays off. Maybe the motor's not 100% going all the time. So I think he's a guy that, could be a boom or bust. I think there's some risk factor there. I think he could pay off huge dividends, but I also think he might not play up to that first round billing. So he's one guy that you might be concerned about. I think in terms of how they come off the board, Xavier McKinney from Alabama, we talked about. You know, I, I think he'll be a solid player. I do. I think he'll be a solid player, but I just think that, he seems to be the consensus first safety coming off the board here. And I don't know. I just think Grant Delpit's a better player. I believe that Jeremy Chin from Southern Illinois it could be a better pro prospect. And to me, McKinney is the third or fourth best safety. So I guess I have a hard time kind of understanding it. Maybe I'm missing the boat on something. To your point, I've been wrong more than I've been right. So maybe I'm missing something there. And then I think we talked about it earlier in the show for the late risers. Jerry Jeudy now. Obviously, we don't know all of the details of this new report that's come out in terms of his medical red flag on the knee that was conducted, during the physical at the combine medical check now. So, how much of a risk factor is that? And then, the Wisconsin center, Tyler Biadasz, I always butcher his name. I'm sorry, Tyler. At one point, he was considered a first round guy. And I think, with the back injury that he had, I think he can tumble all the way out to day 3 now. So he's probably saw his draft stock tumble significantly. How about Brandon Jones from Texas? I think before the injury, the safety there, he had a lot of love in the scouting community, and I'm not sure what his medical update is, but I think it's kind of put him into that day 3 category where you got to like the upside there. And I had a chance to go see Virginia cornerback Bryce Hall early in the season, and to me, this guy was a first round lock. Just really, really fundamentally sound, solid cover corner, great footwork, smart player, tremendous speed, everything you want from a corner. And my understanding is he would be ready for training camp if there was a training camp, but I don't see him going in the first round anymore. So I think, even though there's still a solid, probably day 2 draft grade on him, he is no longer a first round guy that we once thought in the beginning of the season. So probably some guys that come to mind, running backs, obviously. I think anytime you take a running back high in the first round, you have to be concerned about. Look at Seattle, for example. They took the Rashard Penny kid from San Diego State, I believe, coming out in the first round a couple years ago, and here they are now. You're seeing they could take a running back here in round 1, maybe a Jonathan Taylor to fill that Marshawn Lynch role, or maybe even a Zach Moss from Utah. That they can, maybe invest a 3rd or 4th round pick. And Zach Moss, another guy that I thought, he had dipped his toes in the draft waters last year and would have been a relatively high pick had the injury and came back for his senior year. I think he kind of recuperated some of that draft stock. But again, a guy that we thought could once potentially be a first or second round guy, probably now in that, round 3 to 4 range.
Rick is NCIS Fanatic 21 is showing us on the live chat that I just posted to the screen. No, I've never seen a fan base take ownership of a former player like Ohio State fans of Joe Burrow. Like he's still one of their own. They're still claiming, national championships and a number one NFL draft pick. Of course, Joe Burrow, an example of more free agency that we see. I'll call it that in college football, unlike any other time in history. Guys switching teams all over the place. And now it's difficult to find many players that stayed with one school the entire time, where that used to just be one of the great allures to college football was, well, we know our guy, if you're a Giants fan, your guy might go play for the Eagles next year and suddenly he's playing for the enemy as opposed to college football. Well, my guy's always my guy for the rest of his lifetime. He's never going to play for the enemy. Well, that era's gone by us in college football, unfortunately. And Joe Burrow, again, my question about Burrow, Rick, is I just the scouts and the analysts have to be looking past and taking into consideration the Brady factor, the weapons he had, the style of play, the offense. And I know he did all the right things, and he was super impressive and all that. But man, is he that much of a can't miss?
I think again, there's no such thing, right? And
Sure.
the thing with Burrow and the bottom line is good players go to good schools, right? And you could make the same argument for Tua. I mean, because we've got 2 Alabama wide receivers here coming off the board in round 1, and probably 2 Alabama wide receivers coming off the board next year in round 1 that he was throwing to. Joe Burrow, same thing. The supporting cast, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, the tight ends, Derek Dillon, Thaddeus Moss, and probably a better offensive line that he's going to play behind next year in Cincinnati. He probably had a better offensive line there at LSU. So, you do have to factor that into the equation. You do have to ask yourself, like, pre Joe Brady, where was this guy that that we didn't know? It was like Clark Kent and Superman. I think we talked about this on the quarterback preview show, like coming into the season. I didn't think Danny Etling was going to get drafted. He went in the 7th round to the Patriots. And I said, all right, well, Joe Burrow, I mean, he's better than Danny Etling. So, yeah, I guess, he's got a chance to get drafted, right? Never in a million years would I say, hey, he's going to be the number one guy off the board, hands down. But I do think that should Tua not suffer that hip injury, we are having a debate, Tua or Burrow. And, because of the medical red flag on Tua, I think, Burrow has become this consensus pick. But I don't think by any means, Daniel Jones went 6th last year. I don't think he's a can't miss guy. And the bottom line is, the reality is that, we try to identify the best quarterbacks because it's such a critical position. And it's hard to gauge that X factor that you're talking about. Like, hey, why couldn't you beat out Dwayne Haskins? Why were you just a mediocre guy 2 years ago? And, sometimes guys are late bloomers and late developers. So, I think the fact that he comes from the son of a football coach bodes very well for him. He's just a highly competitive guy from what you understand. So when you talk about the leadership intangibles and the maturity, I think that's what's winning out here. So, and again, it's like, I don't know if you had a chance to watch the latest Detail episode. I watched it about 4 a.m. here this morning with Nick Saban. And Saban actually, I haven't gotten to the Tua one, but there's 2 parts, one on Burrow, one on Tua. And, just to watch Nick Saban kind of break Joe Burrow down and some of the plays he did pull off is so impressive. And if there are any doubts, you just go watch that and you say, man, if he can bring that to the table at the next level, well, hey, that's my guy. And just some of the throws he's made, the clutch performances that he's had. And let's be honest. I mean, say what you want about a supporting cast, when the going got tough, the tough got going. I mean, he rose to the occasion in big moments.
Going by the Ohio State spring games, which doesn't mean a whole lot, you could tell that the guy was an athlete in regards to just being able to run down the field and run past some linebackers and maybe some defensive backs just in a straight line. But his escapability and ability to gather himself and make a throw downfield or beat a safety to the yard marker to gain a first down is what another dimension that impressed me, that surprised me. He's not going to replace Kyler Murray, not going to bring him to mind, but man, he's nimble and quick and can really get out of trouble and make throws. Or it seems like he knew what to do. He knew when to run it, or he knew when to escape and find somebody downfield, and made some tremendous throws downfield off platform.
Very underrated aspect of his game, I believe, and that's exactly what NFL teams are looking for: biding time in the pocket, extending plays. He can pick up the first down and beat you with your feet when needed. And you hear the phrase thrown around so much. He threw the wide receiver open. And I think, that's what Burrow does. Like, he throws his receiver open because of that chemistry, the instincts. It's just, they say, what's the it factor? He's got the it factor, the leadership, the intangibles, the complete command of a huddle, right? And you've got to be a leader of men and earn that respect. And I think, you take a look at what Joe Burrow is about. Here's a guy who's going to come in, put his head down, go to work, earn the respect of his teammates, and be that leader from day one. And, that goes a long ways.
Raptor 20 is asking about the draft stock of Arizona State's Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah. And, just one last Ohio State point, fortunately or unfortunately for us, Mark, it seems like we're going to have a whole slew of another Buckeyes at the top of the draft next year, with Fields and Sean Wade, who we talked about in the previous show. And then it seems like they've always got a wide receiver coming out of the woodworks. They just kind of grow out there in Ohio State. So they're not done there. And Ryan O'Day has done a great job, I think, kind of carrying that torch from where Urban Meyer left off. But
and Rick, just to give you a head start on like 2023, they've brought in at this point more top 100 recruits by far than anybody in the country.
Not surprising. And, I think, I'm rocking the Rutgers hat here, who last time I checked had the 12th recruiting class in the country. And, Greg Schiano's comments, I thought I really enjoyed one of them was, he said, I thought I was a good recruiter. And again, he had 7 consecutive first round picks here when he was at Rutgers. He said, I thought I was a good recruiter. He said, man, when I got around Urban Meyer, boy, was I wrong. And I think you're starting to see that now, some of the things that he was able to learn during his time at Ohio State. Here's a guy that, was on Urban Meyer's staff for several years and was even on that New England Patriots staff there for a few months before he stepped down. But he's learned from some guys like a Urban Meyer and a Bill Belichick. And now you're seeing Rutgers do some recruiting. Hey, I know those helmets back there. I owe you a Rutgers helmet. So next shipment in the mail with the Draft Bible publication, I'll have to send that Rutgers helmet. But Brandon Ayuk is a guy that, you're seeing pretty consensus feeling that he's a first round wide receiver, Mark. And we talked about, Judy, CeeDee Lamb, Ruggs, and Jefferson kind of being the big four. Ayuk, I think you could throw in there with Denzel Mims and Jalen Reagor and even Michael Pittman and Chase Claypool as that tier 2 guys. The thing that bothered me about Ayuk was he flunked his physical down at the Senior Bowl, so he was unable to perform or compete there throughout the week. And then I think there was a issue at the combine as well where he couldn't perform in all the drills. So, I think that's my only concern in terms of what the medical really said there, because why wasn't he allowed to participate in the Senior Bowl? Why wasn't he allowed to do everything at the combine? But yet here we are since the combine, I haven't heard anything about it. And you're seeing him go all mocked to the first round, but here's an explosive playmaker, a guy with the ball in his hands that's just dangerous and could take it to the house at any given moment. So I think what he brings to the table is definitely a first round talent. Will the medical have any kind of impact? I guess we won't know the true answer to that until tonight.
We'll squeeze a little more information out of Rick Saratella, NFL Draft Bible. He's my guy. Bring him on here every year, and I've talking about squeezing him dry. I've done that a little bit more this year. We've highlighted all the positions, so catch up with those videos that have been posted in the last week, plus another live stream in which we took your comments and questions, which include Captain Tripp's concern about the Tennessee Titans first-round pick.
Well, I think Tennessee has kind of positioned themselves here to gear up for another run. Derrick Henry's going to be back for at least another year, and he almost single-handedly put that team right into the Super Bowl there. So I think that, they're going to be looking at one of these AJ Epinenza, Yetur Gross-Matos type of players, I believe, inject another pass rusher into the mix on defense there. And, I know they gave big money to Ryan Tannehill, but, at some point during the draft, do they address that quarterback need? Because Marcus Mariota has gone off and signed with the Raiders now, and Tannehill did go down at a little point there. And, listen, arguably those playoff games were pretty scary, not being able to throw the ball for more than 100 yards there in the playoffs. But you could also argue that, the second half of the season, Ryan Tannehill was the NFL MVP. Now, how confident are you? I mean, they gave him more money than Tom Brady got this offseason. So I don't think they go round one quarterback, but it wouldn't surprise me if they at least entertain the thought there in the middle rounds and bring somebody in just to have somebody in case this Tannehill experiment doesn't work out. Because, hey, this time last year, we were all singing the praise of Jacksonville going out and signing Nick Foles for like $28 million a year. And here we are just a year later. They've dealt him off and moved on very quickly from that. So I do think edge rusher was round one. And then I think, at some point they got to explore the quarterback opportunity. I'd like to see them inject maybe another wide receiver there into the mix at some point as well. And, I think interior offensive line might be another direction that they look. So cornerback at some point has to be addressed. And, I think Epinenza, though, and Gross-Matos, if either one of those guys kind of slides to them, I think that either one could kind of fit the mold in terms of what they want to do there on defense.
Rick Saratella, NFLDraftBible.com. It's easy to remember, NFLDraftBible.com. It is the gospel when it comes to the NFL draft. It's tremendous to have the hard copy for sophisticated and technologically based as we are these days. It's nice just to have this baby sitting right next to you during the NFL draft and say, yeah, I think they reach for that because Rick says blah, blah, blah. So that's always a good time. Rick, for anybody out there that's coming across you for the first time, what's the best way to kind of latch on to everything you do?
Yeah, shout out to Captain Trips there with the throwback Oilers hat. I'll dig that. NFLDraftBible.com, like Mark said, if you didn't get your copy, you can still do that. You can still download the PDF. In fact, I do have a draft day promo code, VIP50. If you want to do that, we'll give you 50% off the download right now. And it's got 622 scouting reports, 182 player interviews, little 2021 sneak peek preview. And like Mark said, your go-to source for the NFL draft. We've got every player indexed on the back page. Whoever gets drafted, you look them up, boom, you've got the instant scouting report in your hands. And of course, we'll be on Twitter at NFL Draft Bible with all our live stream coverage. And we will be hopping on YouTube live ourselves at 10 p.m. Thursday and Friday night to provide some live draft coverage there. And then also on day 3 at 5 p.m. we will recap day 3 and stay on air for the undrafted free agent process. And we'll actually react to the undrafted free agent process and cover that live reaction style, which is going to be unique and different. So I'm excited about that. We've had a bunch of players and scouts and analysts and great folks on throughout the week. So appreciate all the love and support. Always love coming on every year with you, Mark, and chopping it up. And the voice of college football. If you're not a subscriber to Mark Rogers TV, then you're not paying attention and doing it right. And hopefully we chat sooner rather than later and do this all again.
Absolutely, Rick. Man, we again squeezed you dry comes to mind every time I think about it, because you gave us so much insight and information and time during well, I know you're busy 12 months a year, but it is draft weekend, and again, I think the proper way to send it off is the way you started the whole thing, and that's happy
Happy
draft day.
draft day to you as
Thank you
well.
so much, Rick. We appreciate it.
Absolutely, Mark. Thank you.